Greetings, greetings, family. Sister Shanice in the house. How is our magnificent family today? I certainly hope that each and every one of you are feeling absolutely blacktastic. Yes, I certainly am indeed. Why? Because I'm in the Galaxy studio talking to the family. Rising up the entire African family, whether, you know, you as an African was born in Zimbabwe or South Africa or the USA or the UKKK or wherever you were born as a melanated African person. We rise you up in power. We rise you up in strength. We rise you up spiritually, mentally, physically, because wow, though there have been those who don't like us, that have waged a war against us, you know, for centuries now, and it hasn't stopped. But we are the survivors of the fittest and the strongest, and you know, we have a duty and responsibility to ensure that we continue to survive. So rising up, our powerful people. Yes, we are a people of power. Yes, we are a people of might. Yes, we are a people who have already accomplished so much on this planet. It's just that a lot of our accomplishments and achievements have either been hidden from us or have been hijacked and claimed by others who have no right to that history and that heritage. But this is a day of awakening. This is a time of awakening. So rising up the entire Galaxy family. Sister Shanice in the house. Rising up the spirit of Nyanda as well, and Kagui, Mukwati, rising up those three powerful spirit mediums from the Zimbabwe region, from the southern region of Africa, sending those spirit mediums down to intercess, for sending them down to heal, sending them down drawing on their spirits for protection, drawing their spirits to give us the courageousness that they had during their times and that they were able to give to others around them during those times. So those powerful spirit mediums, Mukwati, Nyanda, Kagui, we call on your spirit during these times. Woo, 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 woo. Oh, some powerful spirits they were as well. And, you know, we will... we're calling on their names so that they can, you know, bring us courage, so they can bring us healing, good health and discernment and wisdom. And so, you know, they can speak to us and guide us. Yes, rising up those spiritual, powerful mediums that we used to call on back in the days when in need to do so. We need you right now. Nyanda, you said that your bones will rise again, and your bones are certainly still with us, my sister, and the powerful works that you did back then in the revolutionary Chimurenga war. There were many, hundreds of thousands that sacrificed their lives in these wars that they fought in the southern region of Africa to try and hold on to that land. And we should never forget the blood that was shed, and never forget the sacrifices that were made. It would be criminal. It would be a crime to actually do so. So, you know, we thank those ancestors of ours, you know, for their bravery and for their courageousness. And we call on their spirits today. We need to rise to greatness again, like we were back in the days of Monomatapa, like we were back in the days of the great kingdom of Zimbabwe. Yes, calling on the great spirit of those rulers that we had back then as well, like Nyakon Simbo Motopo, the Father and the Son and the rulers of the Monomatapa Empire that, you know, no empire today can compare to in terms of its splendor. We have on the line.
Greetings, you've got Gene from the suburbs on the line.
Rising up, brother G, calling in from the suburbs.
Now, that program is also very interesting because when I watched it, there were similarities between the Europeans and how the Europeans operated in Africa. What it is, it's about, the Buddhist monks.
Mm-hmm.
They're setting up orphanages in Africa. And then they're bringing in African children from the streets, homeless, or people whose parents can't afford to look after them. They bring them in there, and then they educate them. Now, when they come in there, they give them a Chinese name. All the lessons are in Mandarin, so they have to learn Mandarin. Then, when they reach to an age of about 16, they send them to either China, Taiwan, I think it is, Hong Kong, or something, for about 4 or 5 years.
Wow.
For education, for further education, before bringing them back to Africa. Yeah. And at the end, the man who set it up, I think it was in Malawi, he said that he wants to set these schools up all over Africa.
Wow.
Yeah.
They're raising an army, aren't they? They're raising an army of allies. And they're raising leaders of tomorrow as well who will do their bidding for them in Africa.
That's right. Yeah, that's what I said. There were similarities between the way it's almost like they looked at the template of the Europeans and thought, okay, we're going to use the same template.
Right. Yes, the template of the missionaries.
It was called Witness. It was called Witness on Al Jazeera.
Witness. Thank you for that, my brother. I'll certainly try and find that one. You know, these are the things that the African leaders need to be looking seriously at, and they need to be preventing these sorts of schools from getting set up in the first place, because I can see the problems that it's going to cause Africa in the future.
Oh, yes, yeah. Because it looks like the Chinese are looking to take the center. You know, the Arabs have got the north. You've got the Europeans in the south, in the center. The Chinese will just go in there and just occupy.
Yes. We are in some serious, deep problems as a people. If we don't wake up soon and realize we're really going outside there and make the changes that need to be made, then life is going to be extremely difficult for us as a people in the future. And I can see some of our not so distant history repeating itself, because that is their end game, to have total control and domination over us, and again to be oppressing us as a people.
Yes, right. And it's going to be worse because the financial situation in the West is basically collapsed. So it's going to be worse.
My brother, we've got a caller that's just joining us who wants to...
I come up here and I listen off here.
Well, thank you so much for your synopsis of the show yesterday. Actually, the tail end that I did catch was the tail end of that story, just as he was saying that he felt when he was coming back he needed to put on his armor, and this man was almost in tears and shuddering. Yeah, I saw that. Wow.
Yeah.
He shouldn't still be here. Yeah, thank you so much.
The promotion of mixation in this program. This is the plan. It's all about another plan.
Yeah.
They keep promoting this plan, sister. Mixation is beautiful. I'm not going on it. I'm just saying what's being promoted.
Right.
And this is nothing is promoting. Mixation is beautiful. And I said again, the program is about white people, sister. About their views on us. What they think about us. Remember, the program was made not by us. We didn't make this program. I'm for it. Them who made it.
Right.
You know? Even one of the women said, she said, yeah, I'm mixed race. She said, yeah, you're the beautiful black. You're not too dark.
Really?
Yeah, one of them go, she's talking about, they said to me, yeah, you're the beautiful black. You're not too dark. So I said, sorry, no.
So damn divisive.
On TV, you know already. Why is it all the American actors, all of the American female actors are mixed race?
Yeah, so this whole colorism thing, they're promoting that big time, aren't they?
My sister, I leave you peace now. Okay.
Thank you so much, my brother. We've been joined as well by none other than Prophet Kwaku. Rise up yourself, Prophet.
Yeah, Tip, and rise up yourself.
Hotep.
Rise up in the name of the creating force of the universe. The omnipotent being that which is greater than ourselves, who has many names. Oneti Magba, Tono Mefila, Uludumare, Nkulu Kulu, Kwame Blafoshe, Mungo, Amena, Onyeme, Nyame, Jakimba, Ashe. Sis, you know, I was listening to the just before that brother was speaking, and he was asking about this program. I didn't see the program. I'm not one that really goes through my WhatsApp too often, as you will now, because you WhatsApp me things, and you know that you can see that I haven't opened it. I don't have time to be sitting down on my WhatsApp every minute. Make a concerted effort to try to look through certain routes. But I noticed that thing about the Chinese some months ago. There was a clipping going around on the Facebook, and then it went out on the WhatsApp of you seeing these young little African youth then doing all these temple things like that, and then you feel marvelous about it. You understand me? But they have an agenda,
right? And
history is best qualified to reward our research. This is damaging and very frightening things that we are seeing here, because they know there is a generation of us that they cannot influence. And whenever these people do things, the Chinese are just like other Europeans. It's the way we were as Africans before. Yeah, they think 100 years ahead. They're not thinking about today and 2 days down the road. They think 100 years in the future.
Right.
And these very same children will come back to give us a beating.
Yes.
A classic example is that president of Zimbabwe. See, we don't have to go way back to find our examples, my sister. Right there is the example of him and his government. Because he himself couldn't do it. The government had to be behind him, sanctioning reparations for people who did not even have the rights to the land that they stole from the Africans. The Arabs in the 6th and 5th centuries, 7th century, used to take young African boys from the eastern part of Africa and take them to Saudi Arabia and Iraq and Iran and all those places, Persia. Yeah? And they used to turn them into eunuchs and raise them in their houses and make even some of them caliphs. Those same Africans came back to invade Mama Africa and conquer it for the Arabs. I don't have to prove it. People can go and do the research for themselves. You look at the whole of North Africa are Muslims. Mauritania, Morocco, Libya, Tunisia, Kemet. You understand what I'm saying to you?
Yes, my brother.
Algeria. All of these countries have original Africans in it, but you never see them unless you travel there. You understand me? Right? It's what you read a book a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Called African Glory. And in that book, it tells you of the 2 Punic Wars. The one that Hannibal's father fought and the one that Hannibal fought. Yeah? They were betrayed by who? Other Africans, the Namibians.
Right.
Yeah? And also Africans that he grew up with and went to work for Rome. This is what happens, sis.
That's right.
So when we see those things, what it is, because Mali, in terms of economics and things like that is weak. There's no structures in there. Because what the Europeans and the Arabs did, and the Romans did in those areas over millenniums. And this is why Dr. Chancellor Williams, the late Dr. Chancellor Williams, our great elder, tells us that Africa has been fighting a war for 6,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
What they all did consistently was build nothing in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
They stole and they built their empires in their own lands. They stole our salts, our irons, our copper, our zinc, everything. Yeah? Gold and diamonds is one thing, but that wasn't what... That gold and diamonds don't build nothing. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
What builds things is iron, is copper, wood. They stole it out of Africa over millenniums, along with our ideas and our skills. And they went back to their various lands and they built up their lands. That's why when you go Africa, in certain parts of Africa, the rural areas and things like that are very technologically underdeveloped. I'm not saying underdeveloped, because development comes in several different forms. But in terms of technology, machinery is very underdeveloped. And so by the time now the Chinese come, Africa is defenseless. You understand what I'm saying to you?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the story of those French priests them got caught on an airplane with dozens of African children?
Mm-hmm.
Some years ago?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Cameroon. It was in Cameroon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
About 100 of them. 100 children. A large number.
Right. These are... Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these are stories, sis, that you yourself mentioned, other presenters mentioned, I mentioned it a lot, but it's gone, people forget them. But when you look at the trend, because they know that at some point they're going to get people that's going to rebel in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to revolute and fight.
Mm-hmm.
So what they got to do is plant, right, insurgents in the country.
Mm-hmm.
So they take them away for 5 years, they train them, and boom, 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 and then they send them back. Those very same children will be our enemies.
Yeah. Yeah. And they will look like, they will look like us as well, come amongst us, but they will be out of their African mind. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Right? The Chinese want to control Africa. They want a big piece of it. They want it and they need it. There's 1.3 billion Chinese. They need space. And they will get it by any means necessary. So if we are not prepared, and this is why I'm saying this, the project that we're doing in Ghana, the Garvey Town project, is a 300-year project.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the aspects of that project is to do what we call rites of passage for African young people in the diaspora. To bring them there at a young age and do what they are doing to our children. But to train them. Listen, we got African martial artists in Africa. We got them.
Right.
Yeah. I remember that white guy, what's his name, that was in EastEnders? When him again?
I don't know them, sorry. But while you're trying to remember the name, let me read you this text message that says, Sister Shanice, the Chinese are doing in Africa what the British did in Hong Kong to them, with the deliberate intention of creating the same result, a Chinese Trojan horse that will think that they are fighting for freedom, but will actually be fighting for the Chinese imperialism within Africa in African face.
Now they come into this because what happened is Africa is so destabilized now, that and I can guarantee that most of these children they're getting them from the rural areas. Yeah, and in the cities where, you know, children are having to go out there and there's no structure for our children. Our children is our most precious commodity.
Yeah.
In any race of people.
Yes.
It's worth more than gold, diamonds, copper, platinum, uranium, any natural resources. Your children is your prime commodity. And what I was saying about the project is a 300-year project. Yeah? And people need to get involved in the project because the project is not about me and you, Shanice. Yeah, we've reached our age. We have benefited from the sacrifices of generations before.
Right.
It's our descendants to benefit from what we do. You understand? We must get out of this selfish thing that I want to go and have a house and with big swimming pool and do them type of things. Our lives, our future is more than a swimming pool in your yard. Stop trying to be European because that's a European mentality. You understand what I'm saying to you? I'm not saying those things can't exist. If I'm having a swimming pool in my yard, everybody that I know must have a swimming pool in their yard. But why you need a swimming pool and we got the sea? And we could create a public pool. You understand? These things are singular things. These things are selfish attitudes that we have adopted. You said it earlier, that we have adopted and now we regurgitate, even those of us who claim that we're Pan-Africanists. Yeah, we are affected by the same disease that was imposed on our children then, or our ancestors then. We are affected by it. Every day I get up, I try to kill a little piece of it in me. Because I'm still affected.
Yes, my brother, we know only too well the power and the damaging effect of the brainwashing, because, you know, we've gone through the European education system. We've been, you know, indoctrinated by them. So we overs, you know, the power of that indoctrination and what it takes to undo that. And, you know, the de-brainwashing works is what we're doing to try and undo, you know, the damage that the Eurocentric education has done to us. And now, you know, we're hearing from our brother about these Buddha schools that are being set up to do the same thing, to indoctrinate and infect the minds of our African future, who will then be the ones that come and fight against us for their masters, their new masters. Wow.
Well, finish what you're saying.
Yeah, no, let me allow you, my brother, to finish.
More importantly, sis, more importantly, what is the Malian government doing about this? You see, because the thing about it is this, anything that's happening like that, the government must be aware of it. This is African children you're taking out of Africa. What is the Malian government doing about it?
Let me interject there, my brother.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to interject to comment on the question, or to respond to the question you've asked, because I think, you see, from the African mindset that's been conditioned in a Eurocentric education, they're going to see that as progressive. They're going to see that as being philanthropic. They're going to see those people as coming in to help their people. They're not going to see, you know, the hidden agenda, you know, which is what we can see so clearly from all of this, which is why we now have to have our own African-centered comments and viewpoints on what's going on. I haven't seen that program, but I'm pretty sure it's coming from, you know, maybe a Eurocentric perspective, which is maybe a little bit critical of China and a little bit critical of Africa for having, you know, children who have supposedly been abandoned in the first place. But what they're not probably going to be talking about is what we're discussing here, and what our text message sender was highlighting, you know, the cloak and dagger, the Trojan horse, the deceit in all of this. So we're going to have to do, a program on this and try and ensure that it reaches the Malian government.
And I totally agree with you, sis. But right now, this time, sis, me not trust nobody. Me not trust none of them. Because the whole of them are children, sis. They're all coming to see what they can get. Now, if China is doing what Russia did for China, then that's a different thing. Because it was Russia that supported China, against the rest of the Western world. China had to make they had to make friends, innit? In the Boxer War, they were fighting the Japanese, the Russians, the British, the French, the United States, the Spanish, the Norwegian, the Dutch. People can go and do their research. This is the amount of people that had a piece of China until Mao Zedong came to power. And there was a lot of Chinese working with these people then, helping to destabilize the Chinese empire. You understand me? Yeah?
Yes.
So, in a sense, I don't wrong China for what China is doing to build China. What I wrong China for is what happened to them they're trying to come and do to us. You're no better than the people that you were fighting. You understand what I'm saying? Now, if you're coming to Africa to say, listen, Africa, this is what happened to us, and we want to assist Mama Africa, in you developing yourself so you can protect yourself. That's a different argument. But if you're just coming, and that's why I respect that President Kagame. Kagame run out, he's only 18, but he sent a message and he made it clear. We will work with anybody who wants to come and help develop and do business with us. But you must remember that Rwanda belongs to Rwandans.
Yes. And
we will not be disrespected by anybody in Rwanda.
Right.
That's a clear message. Yeah? We and the total opposite to that is that president, I'm not even call his name, in Zimbabwe. That you will come and destabilize all the struggles of the Africans from the time of enslavement, colonialism, and neo-colonialism, which you are. And you come now, you're giving them 3.5 billion that you don't have to give. You're going to have to go and borrow the money to give to them. So you're piling up debt upon debt, right up on the sanctions that's being done in the country. You understand what I'm saying?
Right. We're going to go on to that, my brother. We're going to go on to talk specifically about that. Yes.
Yeah. So and it flies in the face of us diaspora. Remember, and I'm going to say this, sis, because this is true. Us diasporan Africans is the most destituted Africans on the planet. Let me repeat that. Us diasporan Africans, specifically those of us that come via the Caribbean. Is it not a separatist thing? There's a reason for this. Yeah? Because nobody wants us. We go back to the Caribbean, them call we foreigner.
True.
In Britain, them want to turn in English.
True.
Yeah? We go to Mama Africa, we have issues with them out there. You understand what I'm saying to you? And here we are, especially the Africans in the diaspora, right? Because when you hear Africans from the Caribbean, or the descendants of the Africans from the Caribbean speak about reparations, yeah? Especially the ones who live outside of the Caribbean and Africa. When you hear us talk about reparations, we speak about it on a global level.
Right.
You never hear us say African British. You don't even see that in anything that we write or we speak. We include all our brothers and sisters in the Americas, in the Caribbean, in Europe, and in Mama Africa. Yeah? It's only when you hear African Americans say, they will say African Americans. You read their books, African Americans. Yeah? It's not it on them, but it's just to show that we here, especially what happened on Saturday, that's been happening for the last 7 years. We're speaking about liberation and reparation for all of our people.
Right.
And so we're going through them suppression and trying to destabilize and destroy our demonstration that we have a legal right to have. They never draw them things on Black Lives Matter when they were up and down the country doing all sorts. Yeah? They never draw it. They only draw them thing on Extinction Rebellion in the last half. They locked down Oxford Street and all them places for 2 weeks. This is before the pandemic. 2 weeks. Them locked down Heathrow Airport. They never bust them things on them. What is it about what we're doing that they don't even want to mention it on the radios? They don't even want to mention it on LBC. That a man rings up that MP boy there, David Lammy, and asks him about it, and he says that, oh, this is not the show for it right now. This is not the program we're dealing with. This little nigger, yeah, that stands up in Parliament and gives it because his master told him you can talk about it. Them man, you'll only hear them out when their master tell them they can talk about it.
That's right. That's so true, my brother.
You understand me? And we're doing this, and that this man go down there, so go do that. And what they do, they got the medium to spread it out to make us look fools. Look at them fools doing that. Look what they're doing in Africa. You see, we white people deserve reparation. That's almost tantamount to what they did to us in 1834.
My brother, I've got a video clip here I'm going to play, and
I'll call back.
Yes, and also just to mention that we've got your show tomorrow evening. We're going to go into reparations in a lot more detail tomorrow night. Is it from 8 p.m.?
No, 9 p.m.
Sorry,
9 p.m.
Too late.
Dr. Ferguson show.
Yes. So after Dr. Ferguson show,
be on there.
Sorry. Okay. Keep it locked, Prophet Kwaku. We're going to be going into this topic in more detail now. Thank you so much for all that went before. Your contribution is always very, very insightful and enlightening indeed. So, you heard our brother Kwaku there talking about the situation in Zimbabwe. And for those of you who don't know, well, the Zimbabwean government has decided to pay white farmers $3.5 billion in land compensation. Now remember, Zimbabwe doesn't have this money. You know what they're planning to do? They're planning to go around the world with the white farmers and go begging for money. And they seem to think that this is a good deal, that they're going to go out and beg for the money. They've got no thought about the fact that it's going to have to be paid back with interest. This is a sort of crazy deals that, when we look back in history and we think to ourselves, how did our brothers and sisters on the continent even dream of entering into a deal like this? It's one of those situations where, I don't know if they're thinking, well, we're not having to pay them. They're going to raise the money themselves. They're going to raise 3.5 billion to pay themselves, to pay their white farmers, to pay themselves. Of course, they're going to be very happy with that because they're not going to have to repay the 3.5 billion. The Zimbabwean children of tomorrow are going to have to repay. Anyway, there's been lots of views and opinions on this, and I want to play you the views and opinions of our sister, Dr. Arikana Chimbori. Now, she's a sister. We play lots of her clips on Galaxy Afiwi, and normally I agree with most of what she says, especially when she was talking about, the French colonial tax and how wicked that was, yeah? Trending at the moment is Zimbabwean Lives Matter, because there's been such an outcry, especially from young people in Zimbabwe about this. There have been street protests. The government has been coming down, or has been accused of coming down heavy-handedly on the protesters that have been protesting. Not only are they outraged about the decision of the government to actually pay the white farmers compensation at a time when the hospitals in Zimbabwe are in need of medicines and equipment and facilities, at a time when the youth unemployment is so high. You know, it's just it's a nonsensical move to the young people. So even the wisdom of the young people can see the foolishness in the move and the proposal that's being made. And, you know, and our sister, from what I was hearing, kind of dressed it up in such a way. I mean, there's so much to be said about that presentation on so many different levels, you know. But on the one hand, she's talking about the spirit of togetherness, you know, our white brothers and sisters, basically, those who are born in Zimbabwe who don't know anywhere else. What about us who were born here in the UK and don't know anywhere else and are being treated like outsiders? What about those of us who have been deported back to countries that we've never been to since childhood? But, you know, where's the spirit of reconciliation from the Western world? Where's the spirit of reconciliation from the South African, you know, whites? You know, it's just so nonsensical, the mentality, you know, of some of our people. And it's even presented in a way as though we've got a good deal. Well, they're going to raise the funds themselves. The white people are going to raise the funds themselves. Yeah, I'm sure, you know, we'd all be very happy to have the backing of an African government to go out and raise funds for ourselves. You know, the stupidity of it, they're going to raise the funds themselves. So it makes it okay that they're going to raise the 3.5 billion themselves, because they're not going to have to pay it back. If they were the ones, if the white farmers were going to have to pay it back plus interest, then it would make sense. But for them to raise 3.5 billion and then give that debt to the future generations, it's an absolute nonsense, in my opinion. Where I think, again, our brothers and sisters on the continent, some of them in positions of power, think they've got themselves a good deal. But in fact, it's another noose around our neck. And not only that, it's a huge embarrassment. You know, our sisters talking about, you know, let's move forward, you know, in the spirit of reconciliation. You know, it means we'll get the sanctions lifted. There's no guarantee the sanctions will be lifted. And anyway, you know, why can't we do for self? Why is it that we've got in the minds, or, you know, some of our leaders have in their minds that they can't do for self, that they need the Europeans or they need the Chinese in order to be able to develop Africa? You know, what is wrong with the minds of our leaders? You know, and, you know, to suggest that we want to move together in a spirit of oneness. Are they unaware of their history? I know our sister's aware of our history. She's spoken on so many occasions so eloquently about, you know, the invasions of Africa and the dispossession of our land and the treatment of our people at the hands of these invaders. Yet there seems to be the suggestion that we should be thinking of jumping back into bed with those same invaders, those same robbers, those same murderers, and those thieves. It is, you know, just nonsensical in my opinion. And I certainly don't agree with the logic of that. But when I open the lines, I'd really like to hear what you've got to say. So, as I said, trending has been the fact that Zimbabwean youths are saying that Zimbabwean lives matter as well. The soldiers are out on the street. Julius Malema, he's come out and has been very critical of the Zimbabwean response to the demonstrations, and you know, he has had a lot to say about that as well. We'll hear some comments about that as well. But as my brother is you know, organizing to call in, let me go to one of his videos that he played so that you can hear, you know, his response to some of the comments that our sister Arikana had to say.
White farmers for the improvements on the farms that were taken over by the government during the land redistribution program. Allow me to take you back in history, back to 1980. The treaty that was signed in order for the War of Liberation to end is called the Lancaster Agreement because it was signed in Lancaster in the UK. The Lancaster Agreement when it came to the issue of the land, it clearly stated that from 1980 to 1990, the government of Zimbabwe would not discuss land redistribution. But beginning in 1990, the government will implement the land redistribution program. And when implemented, the compensation to the white farmers for the land was going to be made by Britain. Under no circumstances was Zimbabwe going to compensate the white farmers for the land. That was made very clear, and it remains the case today. The government of Zimbabwe, however, was responsible for compensating the farmers for the improvements on the land. That is, for any houses that may be on the land, for any irrigation systems, any dams that may be on the land. The Constitution said the government of Zimbabwe must compensate the farmers.
I'm going to have to say that I'm sorry, Mama Chiwombori, we can no longer continue to have your generation asking us as Africans to always compromise for the benefit of Europeans. We can no longer continue to have you, your generation, telling our generation that you're going to make compromises for the sake of reconciliation with people that we know are never going to reconcile with us. We cannot continue to have you talk about compromises that only see Africans giving to the European and the European never giving back to the African. I must remind you, Mama Chiwombori, that as you said, the Lancaster House Conference was first of all negotiated under duress. It was negotiated under duress when Mozambique, Tanzania, and Zambia were threatened by the United States, Kissinger, and the British to say force the liberation fighters of Zimbabwe to come to the negotiating table. They also told them to tell the liberation fighters that if they did not accept the conditions of the Lancaster House Conference, they will no longer have training bases, they will no longer have bases to launch the war in Rhodesia. So under duress, the Lancaster House Conference was negotiated. Under duress, the Lancaster House said that we cannot take land for at least 10 years. And it is not true that land reform was not discussed in the first 10 years. It was discussed, but it was willing buyer, willing seller, in which our government, in the name of reconciliation, had to pay white farmers in foreign currency for land that they did not want. And they had to pay this foreign currency up front, and then the British would match.
What is going on in Zimbabwe, particularly pertaining to...
Sorry about that. I accidentally touched that. Let me forward.
Zimbabwe was destroyed by these IMF conditions. Black farmers were not allowed to be subsidized, and the only farmers that had to be subsidized in Zimbabwe were white farmers for growing commercial crops to pay off the debts that the IMF had given us.
I may disagree with that aspect of the Constitution, but let's be fair. It's in the Constitution. It has been in the Constitution since 1990 that the farmers would be compensated for the improvements on the land.
Then this argument of saying that everything that is in the Constitution is right, you forget that the apartheid Constitution in South Africa said that apartheid was correct. You forget that slavery was in the American Constitution, the British Constitution. Colonialism was in all European nations' constitutions, but that didn't make it right. So the argument that this is in our Constitution and that it makes it right does not make it right if it's contrary to human rights, which should look at compensation, restitution, and reparations for those that have been oppressed. If it's contrary to international law, if it's contrary to the Jews getting compensation from the Germans, it cannot make sense for you then to be supporting the compensation of white farmers, because the Jews never compensated the Nazis. The French never compensated the Nazis. Europe did not compensate the Nazis. So it cannot make sense, my Chiwombori, for you to be supporting a PR position of a government that is standing on the wrong side of history. Then let me tell you what is the biggest problem. You stand here talking about Pan-Africanism. You stand here about bringing humanity and dignity to black people, but you are supporting the compensation of white people at the expense of black people that never got reparations, forgetting that you're creating an international precedent. An international precedent that's going to make it very difficult for any black people across the world, any oppressed people across the world, any dispossessed people across the world to get anything that was taken from them by force, compensated. You're making it difficult for the Aboriginal to take back his land from the Australian that took his land by violence without compensating for each and every development that was built by a colonizer on his land. You're making it difficult for American Indians to take back their land from the colony of the United States without compensating the hundreds of trillions of dollars of property that was developed with their resources and their labor. That is an injustice, that is a travesty, and this PR exercise that your generation carry out for imperialism to continue on the African continent is unacceptable.
Be it as it may, in the spirit of reconciliation, in the spirit of coming together as children of one Zimbabwe, regardless of your skin color, the government has agreed to this 3.5 billion figure. Now, one might argue that why are they being compensated while the blacks, when the land was taken, they were not compensated? I tell you what, we gotta move forward. We want the sanctions lifted. If this was a tiebreaker for getting the sanctions lifted, let it be.
And then finally, what it is that the Zimbabwean government is doing is creating a precedent that says that white people are the only people who can produce. Because now they're going to be given $3 billion in a country where they're going to use that money to start farming, and they're going to successfully farm when black farmers were never given that amount of money or compensation by the government of Zimbabwe. Then they're going to say black people cannot farm because of people like you who support nonsense in terms of international precedents. You are going to create the impression that we as Africans need to be looked after by white people because of this nonsense PR position that you're taking. How is South Africa going to take back their land? They must compensate or 100 billion to Boer farmers. This is a travesty of justice, and people like you who are paid to speak for us as Africans make me angry. And you people, your generation, need to step aside for young people to start taking over.
How are you, sis?
Ah, yes, we've managed to make connections. I am good, and yourself?
I'm great.
Fantastic, fantastic. Just going to turn you up a little bit so that we can hear you nice and clear. Yes, my brother, we've just been listening to your response to Dr. Arikana's video about the compensation to white farmers. But before we go into that, I know you're not a stranger to the Big G, but there may well be some new listeners listening in. Can I please ask you to just introduce yourself and tell our listeners who you are?
My name is Rutendo Matinyarare. I'm born in Zimbabwe. I'm a marketer by profession and a Pan-Africanist by living.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Thank you so much. And my brother, we've been, as you know, we're here in the UKKK, but nevertheless, as Africans born outside of Africa, our heart is first and foremost for Africa. We live and breathe Africa. And if Africa hurts, we hurt. If Africa's bleeding, we're bleeding. And anything that, touches Africa, that, is in any way going to hurt Africa, we feel it here. And right now, my brother, we are feeling and we are reeling over the decision of the Zimbabwean government. I've had callers who are saying they don't even want to call the name of the president. They are so upset with his decision and their decision to pay 3.5 billion in compensation to white farmers for supposedly this infrastructure that they left behind. But my brother, let me hear your views about this decision, please.
Right. First of all, I'm very excited by this term that you use, the UKKK. I think it captures it perfectly.
And the United Snakes of America. Yes, we have names for them all.
And I don't mean to laugh, because it's actually a serious set of affairs. The issue of white compensation for me is an anomaly in international law. It's an anomaly in human rights law. It is an anomaly in humanity that an oppressor can be compensated for so-called vandalism, which are being called developments on land that was stolen and developments that were not approved by the owners of the land. In my understanding, that is vandalism, and vandalism is supposed to be compensated for. I believe damages should be paid for vandalism. I believe that the Jews never had to pay reparations or compensation to the Germans after Nazi occupation or Nazi oppression, Nazi genocide. I also believe that the French, the Polish, the Austrians, the Dutch, and all of Europe that was colonized by the Germans did not have to pay for so-called improvements, because they were not seen as improvements, but they were seen as degradation. They were seen as vandalism. They were seen as destruction of the heritage of the countries that they took over. Now, Zimbabwe had a heritage. Zimbabwe had its own land tenure systems. Zimbabwe had its own farming practices, all of which were damaged when the European came to Africa, when the European came to Zimbabwe in 1890. And it's very important for us to say, we do not see what Europeans brought to Zimbabwe as developments, because Europeans had run away from Europe, where they had polluted water, they had polluted the soils, they had polluted the air, they had killed and destroyed human health because of the destruction and degradation that they had brought to Europe, utilizing the very same Western agricultural techniques, industrialization. That's what they ran away from. That's what was causing the wars. It was causing the hunger. They had eaten all their wildlife, including the bears, including the hyenas. Hence, there are no animals that are similar to what you find in Africa, because the Europeans ate them all. And so when they brought those practices, plus the tools that they used to ingrain those practices in Europe, and then they call that developments, I actually find that is insulting. It is insulting for you to bring, a death culture from Europe into Africa, a death culture that caused them to run away and have the discovery law imposed on the New World, because they were looking for new lands to survive after they had parasitically destroyed Europe, after they had polluted the Thames. And if you fell in the Thames, there's people make jokes that you would literally rot to death in the Thames. And then they brought that to Africa. They filthied our rivers, filthied our soils. Now they're calling those developments. That's basically a travesty. And so that's why I don't believe that the compensation is legitimate, and that's why I characterize the same compensation that they're giving as colonial law, like the French colonial law, continuation of colonialism pact that Arikana Chihombori talks about so much. And then all of a sudden, she then contradicts in the statements that she made about Zimbabwe. And then I also need to say this before we move on. We've got to balance the argument that the Zimbabwean government was pressured by the UKKK together with the colony of the United States of America, which is actually Indian territory that was colonized by Anglo-Saxons, pressured the Zimbabwean government to compensate white farmers through economic sanctions. And those are economic sanctions that were imposed on this country by the Americans, the British, the EU, the Australians, and the Canadians. So the entire Western world that has gone out to colonize darker-skinned people and non-white peoples are the same people that instituted sanctions in the very same, using the very same toolkit or the same toolbox that they used to bring us slavery, to bring us colonialism. And they're continuing it with neocolonialism, which comes in the form of these sanctions and the forced pacts for colonial debt, colonial taxes, and this so-called compensation, which in many ways is contrary to international law. And so when the Africans isolated Zimbabwe in this fight against sanctions, when the black diaspora didn't speak about these sanctions that were on for 20 years, they basically became complicit with this force, with this use of a financial weapon to push the Zimbabwean people into a colonial tax agreement that has brought about debt colonialism as well.
My brother, this is, thank you very much for that perspective on it. It is so missing from the mainstream media. It is so missing from the arguments that we've been hearing, coming from the government and even from our sister, Dr. Chimurenga. I've got a message here that says, when you hear an African woman who has previously spoken African liberation speak, Kumbaya, you know she has been reminded about a skeleton in her closet by the white antagonist. It's one of their favored strategies, shortly followed by assassination. So we feel that, the sentiments of that is that our sister has been compromised. How can someone who has been so outspoken and so against the French colonial tax on those 14 African countries now want to support the idea of a colonial tax, that her own country, Zimbabwe, should have to pay to its former colonizers? We agree with you about the illegitimacy. I can't even say the word. Illegitimately. Illegitimacy. That's it. Illegitimacy of the claim for damages. And my brother, wow, you so eloquently and beautifully just reminded us, of the great kingdom of Zimbabwe and the agricultural systems and that you had in place there, that you were all using and thriving using, and that was good for the environment and the animal kingdom and everything. And these barbarians that came from this side of the world now trying to claim that they were bringing enlightenment? Really?
The barbarians. Wow, I love that.
Yeah, and so, we are moving, we're just so much on the same page as this, and we want, our people are like, why can't the rest of our brothers and sisters on the motherland, see things from, our perspective, from this perspective? Why is the government seemingly, bowing down to the wishes of those lobbyists, those white farmers who are likely to be some of the same people who were fighting against our brothers and sisters in the Rhodesian War? Let's just remind our people as well, my brother, of the fights and the struggle that our Zimbabwean brothers and sisters, many of whom are under the earth now, whose blood has soaked the soil, to fight to get back the land. I mean, how can their spirits be resting right now? Please remind us of those struggles and a little bit of the history so that, those who are new to this, my brother, can get a sense of, the extent to which the government seems to be capitulating on this, and how it must be impacting on all of our veterans right now.
Before I go into that, sis, I need to also just articulate something that I think is very critically important.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just burping here. So, what we need to highlight to people is that there's always been the impression that whenever black people are complicit with whiteness, it isn't necessarily because of assassination, fear of assassination, or threats of assassination. I actually believe that now the Europeans, or let's call them the Westerners, have begun to use a new weapon. A weapon that was created just before the Second World War, just after the First World War, which is called consumption. And consumption was created with the advent of branding, marketing, and advertising as professions, which were to get people to consume, and to consume particularly American products. The weapon of consumption is the reason why you see a lot of our leaders capitulating. It is also the weapon of consumption goes hand in hand with the system of capitalism that is basically about primitive accumulation, or those with power and position accumulating public resources to put them in their own individual control so that they can prosper themselves materially to consume, right? So that consumption, when you look at Arikana Chihombori's home that she shoots from, you can tell that it's an opulent home.
Mm-hmm.
And she has to maintain that opulent home. And to maintain that opulent home means she needs to keep accumulating. And to keep accumulating, a lot of time requires the exploitation of knowledge, the exploitation of information, or some form of maintenance of an exploitative system for somebody else in order for you to keep accumulating to maintain your lifestyle. So Arikana has to maintain the home. She has to maintain the rent, the taxes. She has to maintain probably a very beautiful vehicle or a number of beautiful vehicles, holiday homes. And once we have one of our own living in a Western country, which is built on that exploitation, particularly of African resources, you will always, almost inevitably find them having to co-opt themselves with the system to maintain their life. So that is the problem. And the same problem is the reason why the government of Zimbabwe and the individuals, the people within that government, made the decision that they made to support the white farmers. They forgot the principle of liberation. They forgot the principle of creating a precedence that will mean that all oppressed peoples, all non-white oppressed peoples that need to restitution for what it is that they lost in a form of oppression or colonialism will have to compensate. So if the Aboriginals want to get back Australia, they're going to have to pay trillions of dollars to get back Australia in form of compensation before they can get it. And if they can't afford to pay that compensation, they will not be able to get back what is theirs. The same is going to happen to the American Indian. If they want America, if they want a return of the land and resources that they lost during the oppression and colonialism and genocide that took place in America for Anglo-Saxons to settle there, they will have to compensate hundreds of trillions of US dollars of the developments that have been made by their exploitation, by their resources, by their labor. And that, in its own respect, is contrary to what restitution is all about. Because restitution is not about the one who wants their property returned to pay the one that took the property. Restitution is about the one who's holding on to stolen property, returning the stolen property, restoring the person that they stole the property from into the position they would have been before the exploitation, and paying damages if indeed they cannot restore those people into the condition they would have been. So I thought that that background, that foundation is critical and important to understand that there is no justification for the position being taken by Chihombori, and there is no justification for the position that is being taken by our president. Now, onto the point you asked. For us to be where we are, a liberation struggle had to be fought because my people were oppressed from 1890. Now, the British came through a man called Cecil John Rhodes. Cecil John Rhodes came as an agent, as a colonial administrator on behalf of the British government. And it's ironic that he was colonizing Zimbabwe at a time where he was also the president of the Cape Colony, or the British Cape Colony as it was known as. And so when they came into the country, the very first thing they wanted to do was to mine. So they extracted fraudulent mining rights or mineral claims and concessions through something called the Rat concession. And when they got to Zimbabwe, when they could not really mine, they began to see the prosperity that was around them in the Zimbabwean farmers. And within these Zimbabwean farmers who were providing food, can you believe it, to the very colonizers. They were selling food to the colonizers. They were the ones that were supplying the shops within these colonies. They were the ones that were providing them with feed for their cattle, feed for their horses. And eventually it struck this company called the British South Africa Company, which was Rhodes's company that was colonizing Zimbabwe on behalf of the British, discovered that there was more money in farming than mining. So that's when they started going for the land. And they quickly started taking cows. Very first thing they targeted was the wealth or the bank account of Africans, which was the cattle. So they took the cattle, in excess of 1 million herd of cattle. Now, I think everybody on our platform can understand what is the value of one cow. So take 1 million of them and understand how much wealth was just taken immediately that way. The next thing they started doing was charging our people poll taxes. They charged them poll taxes, which is a tax on a hut. And that tax was up to £1 for tax on a hut. £1 for tax on a hut in today's terms is £300. Now, this is a person who's been made to pay tax on land that belongs to them.
Wow.
So that's extortion, if you really think about it. From there, they had to pay grain tax. If they grew grain, they wanted to take it to market. They wanted that grain to be sold on the market together with white grain. The grain produced by black farmers immediately came with a tax. So that means it wouldn't be competitive against the white people who had already financed their farming using our cows. And then they created a bank 20 years later that was called the Land Bank. The Land Bank was created from the very same cattle that were sold, from the very same poll taxes that were taken from our people. And then it was also created from the grain taxes and all plethora of taxes, wife tax, There were so many types of taxes. So that was the foundation of the colonial system. And the bank that was created, this land bank, only gave money to white farmers, only gave money for white farmers to farm. We are repeating exactly the same thing by giving white farmers $3.5 billion US for them to have a kitty to again farm with a competitive advantage based on what it is that they have stolen and extorted from us. And that's what led our ancestors to start fighting. And they didn't start fighting in 1964. They started fighting immediately in 1896. They had their first war, started in Matabele land and then went through to Mashona land. And these people came together to fight these whites. When the whites were defeated, they then called on the British to send them an army from Cape Town that then came with Maxim guns, cannon, and of course decimated the people. Within that, the leaders of our revolution, people who were spirit mediums, chiefs, and chiefs were very integrated with spirit mediums, were immediately arrested, executed, and what is ironic is the British took their heads back to Britain. Now, if that is not witchcraft, if that is not some form of occultic sorcery, I don't know what it is. So with that resistance, there were many other resistance that continued to take place. Native Housing Association was created in 1912 to fight the displacement of black people and the fact that they couldn't get a property within the vicinities of the city. The displacement continued to create more movements that in 1922, when the British government asked for a referendum in Rhodesia to make a decision whether they were going to join South Africa or they were going to be independent, the Rhodesians chose that they wanted to be independent. Can you understand the irony in that? That they wanted to colonize us, to control us. But the white Rhodesians, even though they were kith and kin with white South Africans, did not want to be ruled by white South Africans. They wanted their own autonomy in a country that didn't belong to them. And at no point do they think about the people that they had taken land from and were oppressing and governing by force. And they didn't give those people a referendum. So immediately after that, a group of black Zimbabweans led by a guy called Cele started asking, Jackson Cele, I think that's the name, and I started asking, why can't we get a referendum? Why doesn't the British give us our autonomy as well? That was not going to be possible. The reason I'm narrating that is that I'm trying to show you that these double standards of rights, of human rights, have started a long time ago, where white people have the right to choose governance and who governs them, and have the right to govern themselves. But for some reason, the black man is perceived as somebody who shouldn't govern himself and shouldn't have to govern himself. You know? So the British, the Queen then said, no, you've got rights. The government of Rhodesia will look out for native rights in any forms of oppression. We, as the British administration, will be here to ensure that that doesn't take place, which was a lot of nonsense. Because there was oppression, and from there was the Land Apportionment Act. From there were other industrial conciliation acts that separated black people. Skilled jobs were for whites, and non-skilled jobs for blacks. The division of land where white people stayed was separate from where black people stayed. All fertile land was taken and given to white farmers, and black people were moved into concentration camps that happened to be aptly called reserves. And on those reserves, barren land couldn't produce much, but black people were still producing sufficiently so that they became a threat to the whites. That's when they created the grain laws. That's when they created the meat laws and the grain marketing board and the meat cold storage company that would control where the meat is bought, who the meat is bought from, the taxes to be paid, so that black people could not compete. And all that culminated in the Land Husbandry Act, in which black people were limited as to the number of cows they could keep on a piece of land. They could not keep more than 3 cows. They could not keep more than 4 goats. They could not keep over a certain amount of chickens. Wow. So black people could not create wealth with their livestock, because the white man understood that livestock was the bank of the black man. And what is ironic is that in 1938, a research was done and a study was done on the land use. And it was discovered that white farmers were using less than 15% of the land. And a number of white people were beginning to say, are we justified to keep land away from black people if the land is not being utilized? And of course, it was decided that, yes, we can keep land away from black people because it was never about production. It was about denying black people the factor of production so that those black people could remain subjugated. But more importantly, those black people could be cheap labor for industry, mines, and white farms. And that's why we keep saying to people, unless and until you understand the capitalist system, that it is about taking commons away from the peasant. It is about taking hunting rights away from the peasant so that the peasant cannot produce his own food, can't produce his own clothes from the skins of the animals that he catches, and he cannot be able to self-sustain except by working as labor for capital. And that system is what is still ingrained and continues to be maintained today in the United Kingdom, in the United States. Hence, you're always crying, why is it that black people don't have the same opportunities or equal opportunity with whites? That is because black people have been designated to be white property, to be white labor, to be white tools or white machinery to produce wealth for whites. And that is the problem. And when Mnangagwa does what he did now, he ratifies that position of servitude to whiteness, and he basically ratifies our position as possessions to whites, in that our rights are not the same and we do not have humanity in the same way as whites because we're not human. So that's what our parents began to fight against. And the fight started in earnest with these trade unions. It started in earnest with the creation of the ANC in South Africa in 1910, and then the creation of ANC again in Zimbabwe in the 1950s. It was created by people like Robert Mugabe, Leopold Takawira, who had come through to South Africa, been educated at Fort Hare with Nelson Mandela and other liberation heroes in South Africa, where they began to feed off the Kwame Nkrumah, the Du Bois, and other writers of Pan-Africanism and the revolution. Maoism was put in there. They listened to the theories of Mao. They listened to the theories of what is our Marxist brother in, what's his name?
So the great Marcus Messiah Garvey, his philosophy they endorsed. Yes, my brother.
That's what caused them now to say, let's fight for our political rights. Initially, they thought they would win their political rights by negotiating for political power. And some countries in Africa, some countries related to Zimbabwe, which was Malawi, that was northern Rhodesia, Nyasaland, and then Zambia, which was northern Rhodesia, which was one country with Zimbabwe, got their independence. Let me tell you what was interesting about that independence. Mm-hmm. These countries were one, so they shared an army, they shared a police force, they shared all resources. But the moment Malawi and Zambia were given their independence, the British government ensured that the military, the assets of the Air Force, and whatever assets of military power and economic power were transferred wholesale from Malawi and Zambia into Zimbabwe or Rhodesia. So they maintained the power of the military. And then they then say that the Rhodesian government or their settlers in Rhodesia declared unilateral independence from England. The question some of us are asking, by knowledge of the fact that the British gave them the Air Force and the military might, is why did you give them the military might and the Air Force? Why didn't you divide the Air Force and the military assets to Zambia and Malawi as well? They didn't do it because they were in cahoots with the Rhodesians. When the Rhodesians declared unilateral declaration of independence, that was a method and a means by the British government to try and exonerate itself from the responsibilities of being a governing power upon non-self-governing people, because the UN Charter had created or had set out the terms and conditions under which non-self-governing people were supposed to be governed. And one of those terms was that non-self-governing people must be given independence, because there was something called the Declaration of decolonization in 1960. The British government did not want to be seen in contravention of that because they did not want to give rights to black people, particularly in colonies like Rhodesia, where the resources, mines had been well established. So they decided to use their surrogates, which is this Rhodesian administration, to pretend like it was breaking international law, to pretend like it was reneging from the British government, and didn't want to give black people their rights while they were buying time to fix their land rights and property rights in Africa. And if you see, the same thing happened in South Africa during apartheid. They delayed apartheid. That delay of apartheid was deliberately done by the British and the Americans to try and ensure that they negotiate a settlement that would ensure that the property rights remain with whites. And this is written in a document called NSSM 39, I think, written by Henry Kissinger, in which he gave an analogy, he gave an ideology of how it is that no black nation should be allowed to conquer white peoples on African soil, because then that would result in anarchy. It would result in the radicalization of dark-skinned people all across the world, and white people would lose their property rights and basically lose their position of superiority. So when we fought, the British thought that their administration in Zimbabwe would defeat the liberation fighters. The liberation fighters were not well equipped. They initially were not well trained, but they mastered Chairman Mao's theory of guerrilla warfare. And they began to master that guerrilla warfare and began to defeat. And as white deaths began to mount, we saw white Rhodesians begin to run away from Zimbabwe because they were being called up to join the army. They were being forced to fight in the army. But when deaths started taking place, their precious lives meant more to them that they began to run. It got to a point where the Rhodesian army now consisted of 20% white colored Indian and 10% and 80% blacks. And that meant that with the strategy of guerrilla warfare that the Maoists, that Chairman Mao had advocated, of guerrilla fighters going and immersing themselves within the masses, within the people, within the populace, which they come from, where they share the culture, and where they also share this challenge of the oppression by the superstructure of whiteness, would immediately, at the end of the day, begin to influence even people that were in the conventional army who were black. So it was inevitable that the Rhodesian government was going to lose. And when the British government, together with Kissinger and the Americans, saw this eventuality, they then began to push for negotiations. The Zimbabwean government did not want to negotiate because they felt they could win the war. And if they won the war, then they would be able to dictate the terms of the settlement. They would be able to demand reparations. And that was unacceptable for the United Kingdom. So when our liberation fighters were in Zambia, Mozambique, and Tanzania, what Kissinger and the British government began to do is they began to put pressure on these countries where they were harboring our bases to pressure our leaders to go for the Lancaster House negotiations, which actually started in Switzerland. So they were forced to go for the Swiss negotiations. They were forced to go for the Lancaster House negotiations. And at those negotiations, Robert Mugabe went when they didn't want Robert Mugabe to go there. But he was selected by the people at a time where ZANU-PF and the liberation movement was fracturing. And so Robert Mugabe went to those negotiations. He was strong about land. He was strong about the fact that if there is no land, then we're going back to the bushes. But the British countered that by making sure that wherever bushes they needed to go back to, those presidents in those bushes, like Mozambique and Zambia, would refuse them to come back to the bush if they did not accept the terms of the Lancaster House Conference. So that's why I always say it was a conference or an agreement signed under duress. People died. 60,000 people died in the war for liberation. They died because of anthrax. There was biological warfare. The British, the Americans colluded, were in cahoots to put anthrax in waterholes, to put cholera in waterholes. That was the very first time and the very first war where biological warfare became a thing. Hence, I am very wary of GMOs, very wary of other forms of biological warfare, because it was used in our country. It was used to try and stop the liberation movement. They used starvation, closing people off in what we called tribal lands. And in these tribal lands, they were fenced off. They had to be in there at curfew times, 6 to 6, so that they would not feed the guerrillas or the liberation fighters, and at the same time, so that they can be starved whenever it suited the British, the Rhodesian government. So lots of people lost their lives. A lot of trauma was left in our people, which culminated after independence in the fighting, the tribal fighting that happened in Rhodesia, which was influenced again by ex-Rhodesians and the South African apartheid government, but with a lot of use of the psychological injuries that had come from the war.
Mm-hmm. Wow, my brother, thank you so much for that deeply insightful historical perspective and analysis there of, you know, the backdrop to all of this. And of course, heaped on top of that was the heinous treatment as well of our brothers and sisters at the hands of these invaders, at the hands of the Rhodesian army and when they were in government. We've heard some of the stories, you know, like Chipongo, for example, where they would snatch people and torture them and chop up their bodies and put them into pits and cover and blow the bodies up to pieces. So you know, and we've heard firsthand as well, those of us that have visited Zimbabwe and spoken directly with some of the survivors, we've heard firsthand, you know, about the tortures and the treatment, hanging people from helicopters and drowning, you know, all sorts of wickedness our people endured during those times. But, you know, the courageousness of our people was such, and the determination of our people was such, that they fought for what they thought was independence. And so, you know, they thought they'd won their independence. But, you know, the Europeans, they have a way of allowing people to win the battle, but not the war. So, as you said, you know, they were the ones that were dictating, you know, the terms and conditions of that Lancaster Agreement. And we were not independent politically. We didn't win our independence with the education system or militarily or with the law system. So these are still, you know, the European structures in Africa that is being used to control us and, you know, to deny us the opportunity to flourish in the way that we would want to. But if we roll forward now to where we are today, you know, off the back of that huge liberation struggle. Thanks for, you know, the background to all of that. If we roll forward today, we're in a situation where Zimbabwe has agreed now to pay for the so-called infrastructure. I've got some text messages that have come in. Let me read a few of these messages, and then I'll open the lines in about 15 minutes so that we've got, you know, a good while to have a bit of a discussion with our brother. I'll just read a few of the texts, and I'll give out the text line number and the phone line number so that when the lines do open, you can call in. Okay, this message says, hi Shanice, I have the solution for Zimbabwe situation. Tell the white farmers to take their improvements to the land and leave the country with it. In other words, get out and take your belongings. Simple. Rise up, text message sender. And we've got another text message that says, okay, this is a follow-on from the text message that had previously spoken about the possibility of our sister being compromised. This one says, my point is, Africans who speak liberation then switch and comply are helped to forget liberation and continue with consumption by being reminded of some dirt that the system has on them, usually gained during student days in European universities and used as a leverage when needed. Okay, so we hear the point of your message, my brother, that you think they've got some dirt over our sister. We know what they're like in their universities and the sort of antics and tactics that they get our people embroiled in that they have over them. And rise up Sister Sesame from Botswana, who's listening in. She says, greetings, Sister Shanice. It's Sister Sesame in Botswana. The first time I heard Arikana on the Big G, my opinion was that that she was a collaborator. My opinion was based on some of the info in her speech. She was clearly a promoter of integration, a definite tool and weapon to exterminate our people. Yes, my sis, we have this, we have these schools of thought here, my brother. They're the integrationists, those who want to integrate with the Europeans and the powers that be. And we have the separatists, those who want to separate ourselves and build a nation within a nation, the Marcus Garveyites and the like. And we have the repatriationists, those of us who want to repatriate and go back to Mama Africa. And usually we can identify from people's talk, and their presentations, what kind of category they are likely to fall in. That doesn't mean we don't get a bit of a crossover. For example, separatists also wanting to repatriate, those who want to build their homes here and build their homes abroad. But the integrationists tend to be the ones that are most dangerous because, they just want to give away their powers to the Europeans. And we can even even if we look at it on a micro level, we can see on a global level as well. Those governments that want to capitulate, that want to allow themselves to be controlled and dictated to by outside power forces rather than stand on their own ground. Let's see what other text messages we've got here. We've got a message from Sister V. It says, "Morning, Sister Shanice. We have noticed that David Lammy," that's one of our MPs, my brother, "does not discuss anything to do with black Africans as well. Other presenters discuss their own ethnicity. I guess in Europe, some people are ashamed of their own self as well as their own kind. Zimbabwe and Zimbabweans have been foxed. Blood and fire is coming. Some people are hateful and unforgiven, so should not be trusted unless you, the leader, are clever and playing a game too. A noose around Zim's neck. It's always black people calling for togetherness. We've been beaten." That's Sister V. Okay, rise up, Sister V. Brother Gebra sent in a text and he's like, what's happened to her? Bless up to the eye for playing it. So what's happened to her? That's our Dr. Arikana. So, brother there can't believe what he's hearing. Topsy Norwood also sent the video that I played. And this one says, "Greetings, Sis Shanice. Do you know where Zimbabwe will get the money from? My understanding was that their economy is in decline." So our brother might want to comment on that. So my brother, those are a few text messages. Let me give you the text line number and also the hotline number. We'll be opening up the line in about 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so that you can have an interaction with our brother. The number that you will need to call in on, if you're calling from outside the UK, you can either Skype us. You go to Skype and search for Galaxy Afiwi Station, and then you'll be able to interact with the brother. I've not opened the lines as yet. I can see the calls coming through. Please give us 10 minutes. I just want to bring us up to date in terms of where we are today with what's happening on the streets with our young people and comments from Julius Malema and the like, okay? And then we'll open the lines. So the number that you need, you can either Skype us, find Galaxy Afiwi Station in your Skype contacts. You can Skype us free of charge from anywhere in the world, or you can call in on +44 207 193 0174. That's +44 207 193 0174. If you want to send us a WhatsApp message or a text message, the text line number is 07. Let me do it the international style. +44 7377 920 703. That's our WhatsApp number. I'll give it to you one more time. +44 7377 920 703. My brother, we've been hearing about the concerns on the ground amongst the young people. Zimbabwean Lives Matter is trending at the moment. They actually feel that, a lot of them feel that the white farmers shouldn't have been compensated. Youth unemployment is high. Hospitals, more hospitals are needed. Equipment is needed in the hospital. I mean, they are just beside themselves that the government has decided to go and pay white farmers. We're hearing about the protests on the street. We're hearing claims of the soldiers being heavy-handed on the protesters as well. We're hearing comments from Julius Malema. I wonder if you could please comment on the situation that we find ourselves in at the moment. Obviously, we will only be in this situation for a short time because, our unity and our vision for the greater good of Zimbabwe is going to get us out of this situation. But in terms of where we are, Julius Malema, I would have expected him to have been an ally. So a bit surprised by his comments. Can you just mention his comments and give us your perspective on where he's coming from, please, my brother?
Well, first of all, the position that Julius Malema is coming from is a position of bitterness. And it is bitterness on the aspect that a precedent has been set for the compensation of white farmers in Zimbabwe, which means that if they want to undertake land reform in South Africa, they've also got to compensate white farmers. Mm-hmm. And so the campaign that has been launched, which is Black Zimbabweans Lives Matter as well, it's actually a hypocritical position because it surely cannot be that Zimbabwean lives only matter today, 18 years, 19 years after the country has been under illegal economic sanctions that have been collective punishment on 17 million Zimbabweans who have been dying, whose hospitals have been destroyed, they've been deprived of water, education, and social services from their government because of these illegal economic sanctions that were imposed by the entire Western world, which are all our colonizers. But Julius Malema and no one ever said something about Zimbabwean lives for the past 19 years.
True.
And when people like myself have been launching a campaign to try and inform Africans about the human rights violation and abuses that have been happening in Zimbabwe, and the fact that we needed to unite to fight these economic sanctions because they are a weapon tailored to force the government of Zimbabwe to make reforms that suit the Americans and the British, nobody listened. When I said, let's write a petition to the British government or to the British Parliament so that it can pressure the British government to stop, first of all, coercing Zimbabwe to compensate white farmers. It must meet up its Lancaster House obligations, and it must also give oversight on the process of negotiations between the British government, the Americans, and Zimbabwe. They did not join us. Julius Malema did not join us. The Zimbabweans that are complaining about this compensation did not join us. In fact, we were vilified and isolated. We were ostracized because of talking about taking action to stop the compensation of white farmers. So when I see people wanting to protest now, when I see people now wanting to protest during a time of COVID, when I see people having an issue with the compensation of white farmers when they did not want to join us to stop those negotiations, to hold the British government accountable through its parliament, to get our parliament to hold our government accountable, they were not interested. For the past 3 years, we wrote a petition just as two people, and that petition just never got traction in terms of signatures. I think that the people that are now talking about this campaign are hypocritical. Julius Malema is hypocritical because if you understand everything that he said criticizing the Zimbabwean government, he criticized them for being incompetent. He criticized them for oppressing human rights, but yet he never said anything about sanctions. Sanctions are the reason why Zimbabwe is where it's at. And for Julius Malema, in a country that has got a lower education system than a Zimbabwe that's under sanctions, for him to call a government that can maintain its education better than the education system in a country that has got the biggest budget in the African continent is hypocrisy. And then for him to talk about human rights violations in Zimbabwe, because the Zimbabwean government is basically enforcing its COVID regulations and enforcing its laws to stop anarchy or to stop protesters from forcing the government in the same way that sanctions are forcing the government to make laws and rules that are not beneficial for the Zimbabwean national interest. We now have protesters that are being funded and sponsored by Western governments to try and destabilize the country that is already under sanctions, that is already under other forms of coercion. Right. I think it's nonsensical. And to say that there are human rights violations in Zimbabwe just because the Zimbabwean government has decided to clamp down on anarchy is unfair. And to blame or indict Zimbabwe for human rights violations when it does not have a single human rights violation ruling from any international body, it's not under investigation for human rights violations by the UN, the Human Rights Council, or any other international body, I think is a disingenuous and a violation of human rights in its own respect, because you cannot find people guilty without taking them to court and proving their crime and giving them an opportunity to defend themselves. And therefore, Julius Malema is singing the song that justifies the sanctions that are on Zimbabwe, because the Americans and the British have said that they're punishing Zimbabwe with economic sanctions because Zimbabwe violates human rights. And they've said that without taking any single Zimbabwean individual, or if ever there's a person called the government of Zimbabwe, to an international court, trying them, testing evidence, allowing that person to cross-examine that evidence and to defend themselves, and then finding Zimbabwe guilty. Furthermore, even if they did take someone to court to find them guilty, a Zimbabwean to find them guilty for human rights violations, it just beats me that where in international law did it say that if somebody is found guilty of human rights violations against civilians, the remedy or the punishment for that person is the collective punishment of the very same people who are allegedly being abused by the human rights.
Right.
So by Julius Malema taking this position, he has basically taken a position with the violators of human rights in Zimbabwe. And that you must put on the backdrop of the fact that he has said nothing in the past 19 years about the collective violation of civilian rights in Zimbabwe by the economic sanctions imposed by our colonizers. So when he comes and talks about human rights today, without looking at the human rights violations for the past 18, 19 years that led the government of Zimbabwe to be forced to sign this colonial pact, Julius Malema is being disingenuous, and Julius Malema is taking sides with the colonizer.
And at the same time ignoring the human rights violations in his own country. Yes, you said quite a...
I had left out that deliberately.
Okay.
Because as Africans, in a world where the United States has killed 3.1 million Arabs since 2001 for their oil, surely we cannot think that there's any other African country that can be indicted for human rights when the standards of human rights violations have been set by the United States and the British government in terms of the murders that they've done in Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, and Libya. So I deliberately never indict African leaders for human rights violations when I look at the world of evil, of white men that have murdered millions of people. Those are human rights violations. And what African leaders do might be the same, but it can't be spoken about on the same template and the same standards of the barbarity of the Europeans, Westerners, and white supremacy.
Rise up, my brother. Let me open up the lines now. We've got 35 minutes for a discussion. So for those of you that have been calling in, the lines are now open. Please do call in and put your questions, your points, your comments, or your views to what's been discussed on the show today with our brother Rutendo, who's calling in from South Africa. So the number that you need to call in on is 0207 193 0174. The lines are now open for your calls, and let's take the first call that's coming in. I think I recognize that number. Greetings, caller. Please turn off. Oh yeah, when you call in, please turn off your listening device and start listening to us through your phone. So, greetings, caller. Who do we have on the line?
Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah, Triple X on the line. Can you hear me good?
We're hearing you loud and clear. Rise up yourself, my brother. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Wonderful. Thanks for calling in. We've got our brother Rutendo on the line. Okay, we're having difficulty with your line, my brother.
Okay, hold on.
Here we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we're hearing you much better now.
You can hear me now, yeah?
Yes. Go ahead.
All right. So, yeah. Congratulate Rutendo on a beautiful summer delivery. It filled us in beautifully. On the history, the war crimes that they've committed, the Zimbabweans. And as a person of age who has been around from the struggle was going on, I've seen the wickedness that used to go on in Zimbabwe. Also on our trips there, I've been there 5 times now, and I've been to that Acre 3 times, and the wickedness they done to the Zimbabwean people, you can't describe. So for them to turn around now and say they want to get compensation for committing murders and atrocities, it's unbelievable, These people are such hypocrites. I don't know where they get off, The amount of murder and genocide they do all over the world, and then they talk about human rights, Anything that the Africans have done, they've learned from the British and the Americans, especially the British. All the laws and all the wickedness that goes on in the world that is still going on is because of the British and their laws and their systems, And when they talk about their own money, take the money out of reparation. Take the 2.7 billion that you say Zimbabwe own you to your farm. Take that out of the money you owe us, and you're still going to have to pay us more because you're a trillion, So there needs to be a plain.
You still there, my brother?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, the line was dropping out. Continue.
Yeah. I'm there. So if it's dropping out, I'll let somebody else do. Because I know there's a lot of people want to talk. Can you hear me again?
Yes, yeah. You've come back in. Little difficulty, but yeah. Try and finish. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm just saying that. Thanks to the delivery to your guest that's phoned in, and let's just look at ourselves and look at like the man said. When Zimbabwe was going on its sanctions, no African country said a word. No African country supported Zimbabwe.
Yes.
You hear me?
Yes, we are. Okay, callers in the group, if you can all put your phone on mute, please. I've added, we've got about five people in the group who want to talk.
Yes. So let me make somebody else talk, because, my man said that most of everything. But Zimbabwe needs help from outside. It needs help from people, diaspora, to support it, Because, like you said, people are dying from sanctions. And this president, he probably don't know what to do next, He needs to grow some balls, though. That's what he needs. He needs to tell the people that you can't be making one law for us and one law for you, So we need to just get ourselves together.
Absolutely.
Together. All right.
Rise yourself up, my brother Triple X. Thank you for your call. And brother Rutendo, please hold that question, about what we're going to do for ourselves. We certainly need to have our own strategy as well. And I'd like to hear before the end of the show how we can help, what can we do from here to help and support the situation in Zimbabwe. Okay, callers in the group, if you can put your phone on mute. Thank you. I'm going to bring in Brother Akram. Greetings, Brother Akram.
Yeah, grand rising, my sister, and grand rising to our brother Randa. Great delivery, indeed, and he echoes a lot of my sentiments. But there's one thing which I'd like to point out to the brother, which I continue to point out, is this, right? For our liberation, we cannot continue to be begging these people, negotiating with them or whatever. We simply need to lock Africa down, lock our countries down. Our workers need to stop working for these people, live off the land as well as they can, right? Live off the land as well as they can, until those people pay us proper money for working for them. Right? They cannot continue to be taking our things out. I think we have something like maybe 200 foreign forces working and taking minerals and things out of Zimbabwe, right? That is more than $3 billion a year that they're taking out of the country, right? And to me, I said, the only way that we're going to solve our problem, the people need to take control, just like what they did here in Europe when they had a bad situation. Join the unions, get unity together, close the country down, close it down, stop working for these people, right, until we, the ones, get the right things that we are supposed to get.
Rise up yourself. Brother Akram, you're welcome to hold if you want to do so. Let's bring in caller, is it 845? Caller. Greetings. Who do we have on the line?
Brother Kwame.
Rise up yourself, Brother Kwame. Welcome to the discussion.
Mm-hmm. Right. You see, my take on it, is that we Africans in the diaspora or anywhere else cannot criticize the Zimbabwean government if we're not willing to dip hands in our pocket and invest in Zimbabwe. You know?
Right.
Right, because as Rutendo quite clearly states, the sanction has crippled the economy of Zimbabwe, right? And it's up to us as African people to see Zimbabwe as a jewel in our crown of liberation, and invest in things like what you're doing with the goat farming, the goat rearing and all that kind of things. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So we need to dip our hands in our pocket, however small, and try to help the African farmers there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also need to look at ways of embarrassing the British and American government for coming up with such a deal, and also, if possible, find out the addresses of where these so-called farmers live and go there and demonstrate outside their houses, and embarrass them.
We hear that, my brother. So economic solutions, we have got to be the investors in Zimbabwe. We're the ones who are going to have to come to the aid and support of the people. We hear you loud and clear on that. And, our demonstrations a way of us actually showing our support. We'll come back to that. We'll ask our brother to respond on that in a short while. You're willing to hold?
There's a good old saying, Sister Shanice. He who pays the piper, or she, for this man, in any case, he or she who pays the piper calls the tune.
Mm-hmm.
We're calling our tune because they are paying us. So we need to start paying ourselves. We need to start investing ourselves. And when we can do that, then we can criticize.
Absolutely.
Have the right to criticize, I should say.
Yes, I hear you, my brother. And we need to ensure that the investors who look like us have the right mindset as well, because we do have millionaires and billionaires on the continent who look like us, but they very much, buy into the whole capitalist way of banking their money and not reinvesting it in the community. And that in itself is just killing off our own people. So our economic strategy has got to be one that's a bit more Ubuntu. Yeah, hold it there, please, Brother Kwame. Let me see who else we've got in the group. It looks like we've got 451. Brother Lone Wolf, long time. Rise yourself up. Bringing in Brother Lone Wolf. Okay, 451. Who's caller 451? Okay, no response from caller 451. What about caller 092? Bringing in caller 092.
Yes, I hear you, my brother. And we need to ensure
caller 092, you need to listen in your phone, not through the radio, because we're about 2 minutes behind. So you won't actually hear me for about 2 minutes if you're listening via your radio.
Okay. So, so can I go?
Yeah, what's the last three digits of your number?
092.
Okay, greetings 092. Who do we have on the line?
This one, Brother Ayo here.
Brother Ayo, rise yourself up, my brother. How you doing?
Yeah, very well, my sister. And, fantastic show as usual. I've just got some...
Thank you so much. Before you go on, I've got to let everyone know, just in case, they're listening at a different time of day. Brother Ayo, one of our presenters here on the Big G, does 2 fantastic shows here on a Tuesday and a Thursday morning from 7 a.m. So while you're up in the morning getting ready from 7 a.m. GMT time, our brother Ayo will keep you informed about what's happening across the continent, comes with some amazing clips that he finds on YouTube as well. And, if you want to hear good African music from different parts of Africa, brother Ayo show is the one. Rise yourself up, my brother. Privilege and honor to hear your voice. Go ahead.
I want to rise up on the brother from Zimbabwe. What's his name again?
Brother Rutendo.
Brother Rutendo. I've just got some 3 points, and it's a follow-on from what I did yesterday, because it was quite interesting that I ended up doing 7-hour program.
Yes.
It was, to do with this issue. The first thing that people have to realize is the fact that, Wazungu are very, very vindictive people. The sanction was Wazungu people coming together because Robert Mugabe tried to enact the Lancaster House Agreement. And they made it look as if, Robert Mugabe was doing something wrong. Everywhere that they have gone, what they've tried to do is steal people's land and get compensated for it, which is not right. As I mentioned yesterday, Mama Imbuya Inehenda's bones are still in Britain today.
Right.
She was beheaded. Her skin was taken off and fed to dogs. This was done by people who were working for the then British government. What justice have been enacted on that? The people who did it have a name. They have families. Nobody talks about that. But they'll force us to remember all the suffering that other people have, the suffering that other people have gone through. But whenever it comes to we trying to talk about the suffering that we went through and are still going through as a result of these people holding us down, they'll say, no, it's all in the past. Let's forget that. Let's forget and forgive. And I was very, very surprised. I'm hearing Mama Arikana this morning. It's quite ironic that I actually played yesterday a clip where she was telling us of how her family land was taken.
Yes.
On how a pregnant woman was, pushed off the land.
Yes.
So if we've been told to forgive and forget, who is forgiving and forgetting us? This is, they already, classify every black person as a criminal based on the ideology that they inculcated in when they came to colonize us. They're not forgetting that. Every time they see us as criminals. So this is really probably going to be the thing that breaks the camel back, as that proverbial thing says, because you see, the youth of Africa are waking up.
Right.
The youth of Africa realize their wealth. The youth of Africa realize their worth, and the youth of Africa have now noticed that the elders are elders in age, not elders in wisdom.
Right.
And a lot of them are going to be sidetracked and kicked out of the way. Because what they're doing is digging a pit for the youth in the future.
That's right.
But my sis, keep up the good work. And no, the ancestors are waking up. As Sister Cynthia, one of the Zimbabwe poets that I play a lot, said, the ancestors are coming back, and they're not coming back to come and joke. All these leaders are going to meet, all these bad leaders are going to meet very, very bad ends spiritually, because the people's mind is now turning against them. People should look at what's happening to China at the moment. Rats came on China because China showed the world how it treated African people.
Right.
And a lot of African people's mind went against China. And since then till now, all sorts of natural disaster is happening in China. And it's the same way that most African people's mind is going to be turned against all these traitor leaders. There's a generation of people that have to be taken out of power. They were trained to maintain a system that oppressed us. They don't know any better.
Rise up, my brother, for that interjection.
Let me keep the line clear for other people to make contribution. It's really, it's really annoying. It's really annoying. But a fantastic show, my sis.
Thank you so much. Keep up the great works your end as well, Brother Io. Love your shows every time.
Thank you.
Let's bring in our sister from Botswana, Sister Sesame.
Yes, Sister Shanice, greetings to you.
Greetings, my sis. Oh, it's so good to hear your voice. Go ahead. Because of time, let me just allow you to just go straight into your reflection on what we've been discussing here today.
Yes, I'd like to thank you, Sister Shanice, for the work you're doing and for bringing Brother Rutendo on board to educate and inform us today. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to specifically thank him for educating the people in Botswana, and I'm not going to go into details. I know he understands where we stand here as far as really knowledge of self as well as knowledge of our enemy. A lot of your videos and information, my brother, are going around here, and people really love what you're doing to educate them. There's a specific one on GMOs and food colonization that we need to be informed on. I wanted to thank Brother Rutendo again for the other thing, was mentioning how our people fought. He talked about how the Zimbabweans were really fighting the invasion from the beginning, because I think often we feel like we have not been doing anything, or there's a perception that we've all, that maybe African people have just been sitting around not doing anything and being railroaded and their land being taken away. And I think it's important for us to remind ourselves that really our ancestors never sat around and accepted this type of domination and invasion. The other question this is a question now, I wanted to know if Brother Rutendo sees any connection or similarities between the U.S. Black Lives Matter, which we know is Gay Lives Matter, having lived in the U.S. for way too many years, up until 2 years ago, and the Zimbabwe Lives Matter that is now trending. Is there possibilities that these two groups are being funded by the same organization? And then the other question I had was the role of religion in our people who seemingly seem to understand our issues, who seem to understand our pain and suffering that is ongoing because we've been colonized and invaded and continue to be oppressed under these laws. I'm talking about Arikana, the information that you shared, Sister Shanice. Mm-hmm. The role of religion in our people continuing to accept domination, invasion, abuse, oppression, because they are willing to forgive. They've been taught and trained to forgive and love their enemy. Is there a possibility that her decision, because when I listened to that tape, I remember thinking when I first heard her, I did not think that she was amongst us. I felt she was on the side of the enemy. But I just wonder how often are our people really making these decisions based on the fact that they're coming from this religious perspective, which is very heavily ingrained in the minds of our people here on the continent. Well, everywhere, really. So, again, thank you so much, and I'll let you get somebody else to.
Thank you too. Good as always to hear your voice, my sister. Thank you very much for those questions. Okay, I think I've got 821 who hasn't spoken as yet. Caller 821.
Crisis.
Straight Black Pride back at you, my brother Jeff.
Yeah. My sister, I apologise, sis. I'm typical Jeff. I'll call in later. I do apologise, sis. My PC won't work. I missed the first 2 hours of your broadcast. Give me a gist, please. I've got the last 2 callers, but what's the topic so I can make a quick contribution to before you shut?
Okay, well, we are only 15 minutes away from the top of the show, so I suggest you listen to the playback, my brother. I'm so sorry, because I need to give Brother Rutendo time to answer. Okay, but good to hear your voice anyway. Caller 734, have you had the opportunity to speak as yet?
Yeah, 34?
734. 734.
734.
Yeah, not you, Brother Akram. Caller 734.
Yes, hi. I'm from Zimbabwe, and my name is Princess of Harare, Princess Eugene Majulu.
Welcome.
I'm not very happy about this decision by the Zimbabwean government to compensate the white farmers for improvements they made on the land, because they seized this land from us and they destroyed our ancestors' houses. They took their cattle. They also destroyed our culture. I come from the Mbari clan, and my great-grandfather was the king of Harare. He was King Mbari, and Harare was actually named after him. So when the British came and invaded Zimbabwe, they killed a lot of our clan members who were hiding in caves in Harare and Mazoe, which is all part of my grandfather's territory. So as we speak now, some of their remains are still there in those caves, and they are fighting now. They think the war is still on. But we need to do some cultural ceremonies to tell them that we got the land back so they can rest in peace. Now, for Zimbabwe to compensate these white farmers, we actually need to bury our ancestors' remains. And the question is, who pays for that? The British, who caused all these atrocities, have not paid anything to us, and we also lost our land. And as you know, like in Zimbabwe, each city belongs to a certain clan. We haven't had our chieftainship back for Harare because they commercialized the city of Harare and they built, they made it the capital city, and then they took the next city, which is also my grandfather's land, Mazoe, because it's rich and it's fertile land. They made it the farming capital of Zimbabwe. So when they invaded Zimbabwe, most of our clan members, our family, they ran away and changed their surnames, and they're still living as destitute in other chiefs' land. Our government has not resuscitated the chieftainship of Harare. This is a conversation that is ongoing, but they are taking their time from as far back as the time that Robert Mugabe was there. This conversation has been on, and they keep saying they are doing it. They've not done it. So we also have a spiritual connection with the city, and as much as our forefathers have departed, they communicate with us and they urge us to get our land back so we can resolve some of the issues that are giving problems to Zimbabwe. You know, people like Mbiane Handa were killed in Harare, so our ancestors say that city is not clean, it's dirty. We need to do the cultural cleansing ceremonies, and we can't do those ceremonies as long as the remains of those people who were killed, the Mbiane Handa, Sekuruka, are still in London. They're in London at the Natural History Museum. So right now we are actually in the process of fighting with the British to get these remains to come back to Zimbabwe. They have agreed to have the remains come back, so we're just waiting to complete the process. But for Zimbabwe to compensate these white farmers, even before these remains are brought back to Zimbabwe, that's an insult to all those who died fighting for the land.
My sis, we want to support you in that fight.
And suffering. They don't have money to pay the nurses. They don't have money to pay the teachers. But they're coming up with 3.5 billion to compensate the white farmers. That's total disrespect. So in as much as they've signed that agreement, I don't think they should honor it because the British failed to honor the Lancaster House Agreement. And this is the reason why Robert Mugabe then took the land back, which I 100% support him. It is so wrong for Zimbabwe to do this.
Yes. My sis, I want to thank you so much for your call. We want to support you in the fight to get those bones returned. You know, the remains of our ancestors, your ancestors returned back to Zimbabwe. Because of time, we'll have to leave it there because I want to allow our brother Rutendo time to respond. I've made a note of your number, my sis, and, you know, thank you so much for your call. I think everyone in the group has had a chance to talk. 527, did you get a chance to talk? 527?
No, I didn't. I just want to ask Brother Rutendo a quick question.
Go ahead.
Yes, Brother Rutendo, I just overheard you say something about that the white people saying if they don't get their land back, they will implement anarchy on every melanated person around the world. I just want to know, was that before the compensation was instituted or after?
Okay, so we're going to bring back our brother Rutendo. Thank you so much for that question. Thank you, callers. I can see others' calls coming in. We've got the next presenter who's going to be coming in at the top of the hour, so we can't take any more calls. Text message senders, I'll just quickly read a couple of texts. Absolutely brilliant show, my beautiful sister Shanice. If the majority of oppressed African peoples who've listened to your presentation and our brother from Zimbabwe don't see that our backs are really against the wall, Lots of firebomb there, sir. And then it says, then we might as well give up all thoughts of ever doing for self. The Europeans and Chinese need us. We really don't need them. Hence the so-called pandemic, to slow our progress, because they know that a lot of black people are waking up. Enough firebomb. I can't read the other text messages. My apologies for that. This is a quick one, though. I really don't understand. Doesn't the government of Zimbabwe have the sort of knowledge to understand this action he has taken is disgusting and disrespectful? Brother Rutendo, let me go back to you for the last words. And I'm sorry that there's not enough time to respond to all of the points, but let me allow you to do the best that you can in responding to the calls and the comments, my brother.
Thank you, sis. And before I even go on, Princess Majuru, her story is touching. It's also really humbling to be in the presence of people with such a history and a legacy and family of the magnitude and stature of Princess Majuru, because those are the people that are actually our leaders in that country, rather than these leaders that have been selected by a democratic Westminster system of politics that is foreign to us, as the laws of the nation are foreign to us. And before we put the phone down, I would actually like to ask for permission if she could allow you to give me her number. Maybe if she can send you a text, maybe she can call in and just allow you, or you can give her my numbers. I would like to speak to Princess Majuru, definitely, because she definitely is somebody that is royalty of the nation. And then I was listening to Triple X. Triple X said that everything that evil that Africans are doing comes from the British and the Americans. So basically, it's a Eurocentric system: oppress, take, and prosper and maintain through stealing. That is a culture that they have created, a culture that made them run from Europe, as I said. That's why they had never-ending wars. That's why they had the First World War, Second World War. It was again about greed, self-centeredness, and taking from other people. And he talked about how Zimbabwe needs help from the outside world. We need help from the outside world, but we strictly need help from the outside world of our own people. So that is the African diaspora. We are tired of the Eurocentric form of development. We are tired of Eurocentric relationships because they are parasitic. Europeans are parasites. They don't have resources. The only way they can survive is being parasitic on those that have resources. So those are relationships that I think Africa should be putting behind itself and forgetting about. And he also asked, what must we do going forward for ourselves? We need Africans to invest in Africa. The land that is in Zimbabwe, the resources that are in Zimbabwe, or anywhere else in Africa should be invested in and controlled by Africans. And you said something beautiful. You said, and when Africans come to the African continent, they need to come with a mentality of Ubuntu, a mentality of understanding that there are African values that we have to adhere to, and we cannot afford to continue to adhere to the death system of the European. Then Brother Akram talked about we must, to liberate ourselves, we must stop negotiating with these people and shut Africa up, shut ourselves up, and begin to work to do our own development and only work with the Europeans when they are ready to pay full value for what it is that we have. I have got mixed feelings if we even should be doing any business with these Europeans, because they don't seem to understand the values of quid pro quo. They don't seem to understand the values of fairness, equity, and justice. Then Brother Kwame said we cannot criticize Zimbabwe if we are not going to be investing in Zimbabwe. And that, again, seems to tie in with the points that have been made by Brother Triple X, that we need to invest in ourselves. African diaspora in the United States of America, in the Caribbean, in Europe, in Asia, needs to come back home and invest back home. We cannot continue to complain about exploitation by Europeans when we are not investing in controlling our resources, controlling our land, and controlling our labor. And we also need to remember that the investment that we need to implement is not the Eurocentric form of investment, but it is the form of investment that was called communalism that existed in Africa before the European came. this concept that your wealth is everybody else's wealth and everybody else's wealth is your wealth is the way we need to develop that. When we're creating our commonwealth, it must be a commonwealth that benefits everybody and not some form of a pyramid structure of exploitation that has been built by the Europeans to sustain their lack at the expense of those that have got. I think on that very same part, there was a point I needed to make. I just forgotten about it. Okay, and the diaspora of the diaspora must definitely invest in Zimbabwe, and I think even in paying this debt, imagine if Africans could bring up the 3.5 billion, and then we would have to repay it to ourselves, so that whatever money is reinvested to us can be reinvested back on the continent. That would be the most ideal situation that we could have. But that would only be a second resort after we have failed to basically nullify what I think is an avoidable agreement. This agreement has no legal standing. This agreement does not go hand in hand with case law in international law or the precedents that has been set for the Jews, the French, the Italians, and everybody else that was given reparations. Because you must remember, after the Second World War, not only the people that were oppressed by the Germans were given reparations, but even the oppressors enjoyed the benefit of the Marshall Plan, which was given to everybody, and they only had to pay back 15% of that Marshall Plan instead of paying back 100%. And then that Marshall Plan would have to be reinvested back into the economy as a revolving loan. So imagine Germany got $15 billion, which it has been using as a revolving loan to start businesses since the end of the Second World War, and the Germans have been able to turn that 15 billion into 300 billion today that continues to start new businesses and fund industry in the in Britain. I mean, in Germany. Imagine how unfair that is. Yet Africa never got any Marshall Plan. And that American Marshall Plan that benefited the Germans, that benefited some of the antagonizers of the Second World War, also happens to have come from Africa. It's the reason why colonialism was continued in Africa when Europe had gone to Germany to fight German imperialism or German colonialism. That is just incredible. Then we have Ayo. Brother Ayo said that European people are vindictive. That is a fact. And there's a lady from Botswana, Sesani, who also talked about how Europeans are vindictive, but we as Africans are forgiving. We want to be friends. We let religion dictate to us that we must forgive and forget. Now, that is a very big problem. However, the concept of forgive and forget sometimes is to say, don't carry the baggage of hatred with you. So we've got to remember what it is that has been done to us. We've got to use the lessons learned from the oppression we've suffered to allow us to know how it is that we behave and treat other people in the future.
My brother. Yes, unfortunately, we are just 1 minute away from the top of the hour, so you've just got 30 seconds left. My apologies to all the text message senders whose texts I haven't been able to read out, but basically there's been a lot of messages there. Just bigging you up, my brother. Sister Shelley, thanks for your text as well. But let me give you 30 seconds, and then we've got to end there.
Thank you as well.
So I just wanted to say that. Is it me or somebody else?
Rutendo, my brother Rutendo. Just 30 seconds. Sorry, callers, we don't have any more time. Yeah.
So what I just wanted to tell Sister Sasani is that let's not harbor the grudge, but let's remember what was done to us. Let's not accept the same things that have happened to us to happen again. And when we do forgive, that doesn't mean that we forgive and we become friends with an enemy. We must keep our enemy far away. And like I'm saying, we mustn't work with them because they do not have anything to offer but death. And so finally, guys, if we're going to pick up Africa again, we need to learn from the lessons of the past. We need to stop being like our ancestors and our elders who continue to be in servitude of a person that has no interest in working with us.
Right.
They don't have anything to offer. They've got a death culture, and we have got a life-giving culture. The two don't mix. Let's stop mixing with these people because there's absolutely no reason for us to, unless they're willing to change to our ways.
Ashe.
Very much.
My brother, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to call in. I've got a request asking if you can call into another show. We've got a show tomorrow night with our brother Kwaku as well. Family, please make sure you've locked into that one. Chief Pakambrabai, Dr. Abu, myself and Sister Anoa alongside Prophet Kwaku from 9 p.m. tomorrow evening through to about midnight. And you know, we are going to start the thing and we are going to do some works as well. My brother Rutendo, thank you so much. All the callers, text message senders, thank you all so much. We are going over now to our brother DJ Iconic Show.